Didn't you all know there are no rules for clowns? At least the clowns think so. And an ex-prime minister loses his parliamentary pass. This has never happened before, even in crazy British politics. And this has not happened in British democracy for hundreds of years. A prime minister is accused by a parliamentary committee shortly after his departure of having lied to and deceived Parliament. Well, Boris Johnson, of course, has now done it. But Boris Johnson doesn't just disappear. And now, well, the Tories are arguing about him so fiercely that one wonders who is running this country right now. But let's talk about the other thing first. The House of Commons committee in the London Parliament is thoroughly settling accounts with former Prime Minister Boris Johnson in the lockdown party scandal. The verdict on Boris Johnson could not have been more devastating. The former Prime Minister had deliberately misled the British Parliament on several occasions and had total contempt for it as an institution. That is according to the 7 members of the relevant lower house committee charged with examining the issue by the House. And in their report published on Thursday, the members of the Parliamentary Rights and Duties Committee, they confirmed what the world had long, well, they said suspected, but I say known. Namely that Boris Johnson knew full well that there had been banned lockdown parties at the UK government headquarters, as he denied in time and time again in the House of Commons. The bottom line of the report was that Johnson had simply told MPs blatant lies, and that what he also stubbornly claimed in the House of Commons was not true either, namely that his top officials had always assured him that he had obediently complied with all regulations. That, the committee said, was out of the question. The 106-page report left no doubt how serious its authors considered the web of lies they believed Johnson had ensnared Parliament with, rather than telling the truth in a situation as serious as the COVID pandemic. The 7 MPs sitting in court accused him of complete contempt for Parliament, 4 of whom belonged to his own party. And Johnson also tried to deceive the committee itself. He questioned the legitimacy of Parliament with vicious attacks and took part in a campaign to intimidate committee members. And the panel said it was an attack on our democratic institutions. And many Britons now see themselves confirmed, as Johnson's liar's image is up there. And with the investigation of the Committee of Inquiry, however, they at least connected the hope of justice. After all, the citizens of the island had made great sacrifices, for example, by not being able to personally say goodbye to dying relatives and friends due to the strict rules during the lockdown. And the so-called Partygate affair began in autumn 2021, we all know that. British media published reports of celebrations at Downing Street and also other government agencies during the pandemic. And there was a wine fridge, and staff encouraged everyone to bring their own booze to the meetings. And although Johnson was not present at most of these celebrations, he is said to have known about them. And had Boris Johnson still been an MP when the report was published, the committee would have recommended the House of Commons punish him for a record 90-day suspension, which would have required a by-election in his Uxbridge constituency anyway. But of course, Boris Johnson was no longer a member of the House of Commons that day. When the committee submitted the report to him in advance so he could comment on it, he decided not to wait for its publication and for a showdown in the House of Commons or in his constituency. Instead, last Friday night, he lashed out in cold anger at the committee, which he saw as nothing but a kangaroo court, so a mock court, and an evil conspiracy. The purest witch hunt had been organized, he rumbled, just to drive me out of Parliament. Well, Johnson promptly resigned as MP before it could taken from him. And so now when Parliament votes on the committee report today, suspension will no longer play a role. After all, the ex-Prime Minister has already vacated its seat. But as an aggravation of the original sentence, Johnson is now also planned to be denied the parliamentary pass which former MPs normally have, and which gives them free access to their old workplace. And Boris Johnson is said to be banned from Westminster. And with their grotesque conclusions and their crazy punishment, as Johnson said, his opponents were now apparently reaching a final step in the back in their political assassination attempt. My God, he's a lot of wording for that. A measure that a large number of Tories are now demanding of their party and government leader. They would hit the former Prime Minister much harder. Rishi Sunak should ensure that Boris Johnson, his former boss, can no longer run for re-election as a Conservative candidate anywhere in the country. That's what they demand now. But Johnson also lost his first job as a journalist after making up a quote, and his journalism career took off as he entertained his Eurosceptic leadership by inventing Euromyths. But the worst thing is undoubtedly being found as a lying Prime Minister. And does he show remorse? No, not a trace. Inside improvement, reparation, that would be laughable. And instead, Johnson just counterattacks. A man without honor doesn't know when to shut up here. And Johnson will now also work as a columnist for the Daily Mail. And he did not obtain the necessary consent for it. But he still has announced that he will be a columnist for the British tabloid Daily Mail after retiring from the House of Commons. And contrary to the regulations for former members of the government, he did not obtain approval for the step from the responsible ACOBA committee. But he's saying he will write completely uncensored stuff, that he said in a video released by the tabloid. He's expected to take a sharp step at incumbent Prime Minister Rishi Sunak there. And Johnson supporters blame Sunak for his political exit. A spokesman for ACOBA confirmed that no request had been received from Johnson. And the chairman of the committee, Eric Pickles, therefore wanted to ask the Conservative politician for clarification. Back in 2018, Boris Johnson had a column he started after resigning as Foreign Secretary. And Johnson is said to have been paid £275,000 for his work at the Telegraph newspaper. And even then, Johnson did not seek approval from the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments. That is what ACOBA is. So rules are there for everyone, just not for Boris Johnson. Not during COVID, not during his time in government, and not now. And that man will never change. But it will be the most interesting point. I just had a few lines in the video. If the Conservative Party will act here, and if Sunak will have a majority behind him, or enough people behind him, to make sure that Boris Johnson will not run in another constituency. I mean, he moved to a constituency that's probably safe even when Labour get a landslide win in the next general election. And the biggest fight of the year will be to see if Sunak can keep Johnson from running in that constituency, because we all believe that this is the plan Johnson has. And there will be a real mud fight in the Conservative Party in the weeks and months to come. The next general election, it's more like the Tories fighting against the Tories in the next general election and not Labour. So it's getting really interesting. And I usually say something like, if you want to know, see another video right now and so on, it's here in the end screen, it is. But there are also 3 other things here in the end screen. One is to subscribe to this channel, and 2 are other channels. One is the gaming channel, where I talk about Star Trek Fleet Command. If you're interested, have a look. And the other one is Outside Views Games, where I publish a new game every month that you can play with friends or family. So have a look there as well. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.